Have you ever met a child who completely surprised you with their character? In the summer of 2006, my golden retriever, Reagan, had a litter of 14 puppies. I took off 3 weeks of work so that I could rotate them for feeding on mama's milk. As they grew and became playful, the neighbors started taking notice. My next door neighbor Beth kept very strange hours. Every morning, around 4 a.m., I'd let Reagan and Roxy out to play and use the bathroom. Beth would walk up to the edge of her adjoining yard and ask how the puppies were doing. I'd politely answer and ask how her son Mitch was doing. We'd talk for about 20 minutes and then move on with our day. When the puppies were about 6 weeks old, Beth told me that her son was interested in having one. I stopped her right there and informed her that if Mitch was interested in a puppy, he should talk to me directly. The very next morning, Mitch walked over and asked if he could talk to me for a minute. I invited him to sit on my porch with me. I hoped it would help ease some of his obvious anxiety. He asked me how much I was selling the puppies for. I told him $650 each. I could see his mind working something out by the way his eyes darted back and forth, as he mumbled a few numbers under his breath. He said, "Leon, I would like to buy a puppy and name her Ginger." He told me that he didn't have a single dollar saved, but that he'd find a job, make payments and be her best friend for life. Obviously, I had concerns. Here was this 13-year-old boy, with no money and little to no sense of responsibility, who thought that raising a dog was a good idea. I did my very best to make sure that each puppy was going to a good home and I wasn't about to sell one of them to some irresponsible kid. In my head, I quickly devised a plan. I told Mitch that he had 4 weeks to save up $400. He had to give it to me in exchange for a 10-week-old puppy of his choice. He could pick the puppy today, but he couldn't have her until he had the $400. After that, he had to continue paying $100 a week until his debt was satisfied. If he defaulted, by even one day, I got Ginger back. He shook my hand to seal the deal. Mitch found a job that same day while I was at work. He started delivering newspapers 7 days a week. He mowed lawns and did whatever he could to make and save a buck. I think it was 3 weeks later that he handed me $650. He was so driven and I was so impressed that Ginger was his. After all, we'd shook on it. I let him know that if there ever came a day when taking care of her wasn't possible, to please give her back to me. I told him to never give her to anyone else. Mitch knew how I treated my dogs and it was an easy commitment for him to make. We shook on that as well. For the next year and a half, Mitch and Ginger were inseparable. He was always walking her and playing with her. He loved her so much. But, as it goes, life can be very cruel sometimes. The day after the new year in 2008, Mitch wasn't out at all with Ginger. I didn't see him the next day either. It was probably January 5, 2008, when my doorbell rang. Mitch was just standing there. I answered and immediately knew something was wrong. I thought for sure that Ginger had been hit by a car. He tried to be so stoic but, in his bravest shaking voice, he told me that his mom had died. He'd found her in the kitchen on the 2nd and immediately called 911. She'd had an aneurysm and had fallen sometime the night before. He asked me if I could take Ginger back because his dad only had a 1-bedroom apartment and there were no pets allowed. I felt my chest tighten and throat swell. My eyes started blinking really fast, trying to hold back the tears. He handed Ginger's leash to me and slowly walked to his father's car with his head hung very low. I brought Ginger inside and unleashed her. Kneeling down, I made eye contact with Ginger and started crying. The pain was just too much for me to bear. My heart was broken for Mitch and for Ginger. 3 weeks later, Ginger was getting along just fine with her sister, mother, and my 2 other dogs. A few days after that, I saw Mitch walking up my driveway. I opened the door with Ginger and invited Mitch inside. Mitch told me that he'd talked to his father about moving back to Akron. They had found an apartment a few blocks from where I lived. Mitch asked me if he could pick up Ginger on Fridays after school and drop her back off on Sunday nights. Their apartment was only a few blocks away, so I was confident that if he needed any help, I'd be right there. I agreed to the arrangement, which reminded me of a shared custody agreement between separated parents. My only real concern was that Mitch would outgrow his desire to be with Ginger. Mitch was about 16 by then. I was afraid that with school, driving, working, and a girlfriend, he'd start missing the pickup times and just slowly fade from Ginger's life. Friday was the big day. I got Ginger excited for the 4:30 p.m. pickup. Mitch's father pulled up to the end of my driveway and the passenger door swung open. Ginger tore off down the driveway and greeted Mitch with jumping kisses. Every week, like clockwork, Mitch had Ginger for 3 days. I would see them walking through Akron Park together and playing on the hockey rink sometimes. For more than 7 years, Mitch never left her alone on the weekends. Mitch was the best thing that ever happened to Ginger. But, when I had to have Ginger put down, I knew it would be a very hard conversation to have with Mitch. Ginger was old and her hips couldn't handle another surgery. It was a very sad day, but Mitch and I both knew it was time. Ginger lived a full life and was loved every day of it. Years later I was having a cup of tea at the local coffee shop today preparing a painting proposal. I looked up and there he was. Mitch sat down with me and told me he would graduate college in a few weeks. We laughed and talked about Ginger a lot. I was so shocked at how grown up he was. We ran out of time quickly. I never got to tell him how proud of him I was or how impressed I was that he'd saved his money to buy his first and only dog. I never told anyone that I cried for weeks when Beth died. And until now, I never told anyone that the bravest man I've ever met was a 13-year-old paperboy. I want to leave my girlfriend who was roped. I realize right up front that I'm going to come across as a jerk and I will probably get lots of hate for this, but I'm looking for all points of view. Also, this is going to be very long because I just don't know what to leave out and honestly I need to vent some. Here is the story. A year ago, actually a year and a month ago, my girlfriend was roped as she was leaving work. Thankfully she was not unalived, however her attacker did threaten her with a weapon. Fortunately the store she works at had cameras in the parking lot, and between them getting video of the attack and the bank across the street getting the attacker's car on camera, the police were able to catch him within a day. Between the video and DNA testing, he did not even contest, he just plead guilty in exchange for not receiving the max. Since there were aggravating circumstances, the weapon, the judge gave him a 20-year sentence, and with time for good behavior he can be out in about 10 years, give or take. I tell you all of that to make it clear that her attacker is no longer a threat. She doesn't have to fear him coming back for her, at least for 10 years or so. Obviously this was a very traumatic event in her life, and while I was not a victim per se, it was also very traumatic for me as well. I can't imagine what she has gone through, and I don't compare my situation to her at all. But I have had severe bouts of depression because I couldn't protect her, and knowing someone else was harming her sometimes was almost more than I could handle. Right after the incident she did not want to see me. I get that, it hurt, but I understood. Her parents picked her up from the hospital and I did not see or hear from her for a week, which I sort of get, but I think I could have gotten a text or something just saying she was okay. Finally a week and her sister calls me and lets me know that she is staying with her parents and she will be calling me in a couple of days. She never called me. Instead I once again get a text from her sister saying she would like me to come over for a few minutes so we can talk. I get up and go over and am greeted at the door by her mother, who very calmly and very coldly starts laying out to me how I am to act and what I am to say. I am further instructed to not attempt to make any physical contact with her, as in hug or anything. Okay, again I get it, major trauma. I'm sure they have been coached by therapists/counselors or something in what to say and do around her, so I play along. I walk in and she is sitting on a chair with her dad standing next to her and her sister sitting on the couch. As I walk in the room the sister starts talking and telling me that my girlfriend wants me to know that she is okay, but obviously she has been traumatized and appreciates my understanding in her recovery. She never said one single word to me and barely looked at me. Again, this was right after the event and I'm understanding that this is how it has to be. But honest to God, that entire conversation was just awkward as hell. I leave, go home and attempt to focus on how I can help her. I start Googling how to deal with a rope survivor and what I can expect. She starts going to therapy initially 2 times a week, then after 2 months it goes down to 1 day a week. In the meantime she finally makes contact with me and asks to meet at a coffee shop. I get there and she is already there and waiting. At this point in time they had her so medicated that I was dealing with a zombie for the most part. There was no emotion and she was very methodical in her speech. Basically she wanted to get together that day to tell me that she couldn't go out with me for a while until she got past some issues she was dealing with. Of course I told her I understood. This was almost a month after the attack and this was our first conversation by ourselves, so I was already living under this assumption. I told her I would be there for her and that whatever she needed, whether that be space or a shoulder to cry on or anything, I was there for her. I started to tell her that I loved her and she stopped me. She told me that right now she didn't want to hear that and that I had to respect her wishes. I was once again a little hurt and frankly surprised, but I said whatever she wanted. She starts texting me the next day. Little things, nothing important, but I think it is a big step in getting back to where we were. This goes on for another month and a half. I finally asked her at the month and a half mark if we could meet for dinner. She didn't reply for 2 days and then said that she had to wait for to talk to her therapist. Finally she agrees to this but sets the date for another month away. Now mind you, this is almost 4 months after the attack and so far I've had 1 physical conversation with her in person and 1 bizarre conversation with her and her family. Oh yay, I need to mention this. I am not being updated on her progress by anyone. Granted, I realize that I am not officially family nor am I entitled to do anything, but it would have been nice to just get a text or call or something from someone telling me that she was doing good in therapy or was not or anything. We go out to eat at a small bistro that we ate at all of the time. I met her there and I was waiting for her to show up. After sitting for a half hour waiting, I text to see what was up. I just get a text of on my way. She finally arrives and sits down. I ask her how she has been and she snapped at me and told me to not ask her personal questions. We ate and after dinner I wanted to just sit and talk because I missed the person I had talked to almost every day for the previous 3 years. But when she was done eating she said that she was ready to go home. I asked her if she could stay for just a few minutes to talk, but I could see that she was becoming physically anxious and I did not want to upset her, so I said that I loved her and missed her. She just walked away. She goes back to texting me the next day like nothing had been wrong. We actually start to see each other once a week for lunch and she is getting more and more comfortable with being out, so she sits and talks a while. She has also started a new job which she tells me about. This goes on for another 4 months. I'm happy to see her and all, but honestly I'm very lonely and we have not even so much as held hands. Then one day she doesn't show up for lunch. I text to see if she is okay. No reply. I call her parents to see if they know where she is and to make sure she is okay. I got the runaround from them and by this time I'm starting to get upset because I don't want to know where she was at or anything, I just wanted to know if she was okay. After actually saying that, her mom says, yes she is okay but don't expect to hear from her for a while. Well, that makes me start to thinking she has had a relapse and is in the hospital. But what can I do? All I do is go home and try and take my mind off of it. 2 weeks pass with nothing from anybody. I'm trying my best to be reasonable here, but basically I call her sister and ask if she is still alive or what. She knew I was getting frustrated, so she apologizes, but that her sister told them to specifically not let me talk to her. At this point I break down. I don't know what I've done wrong here. I have not pushed her. I have not tried to get her to be with me in any way other than to just talk to me, and even then I have had very generic conversations so as to not upset her. I then get a text from her asking if I would meet with her at an address I wasn't familiar with, but once I looked it up I determined this was a therapist office. I am told be there at 4, which meant I had to leave work early to get there. I check in at the front desk and am told that the therapist wants to speak to me alone for a few minutes. She comes in and I now know where the parents were getting this from, because after formally greeting me she then started to provide me with a list of do's and don'ts. She then told me that my GF wanted to speak to me and had something to tell me. I go in and she is sitting on one chair and I am instructed to sit in the other. She has a box of tissues and has been crying. The therapist tells me that I am here because my girlfriend has something to tell me and that she wanted the safety of therapist office to feel safe. She then proceeds to tell me that the reason she did not meet me for lunch that day is because she was with another guy, somebody from her new job, and that they had been intimate with each other. She might as well have taken a weapon out and shot me, it couldn't have hurt anymore. I just drop my head and begin to cry. The therapist then pipes in with some logic about her taking back her sexuality since she was attacked and how this wasn't cheating in the same sense of cheating. My girlfriend then proceeds to tell me that she does not want to lose me and that she is just very messed up in the head and that it was a one-time thing and blah blah blah. I feel very trapped at that moment. I felt like I was ganged up on, and the more I set the matter I got. I finally just said to her, "You haven't so much as held my hand in the past half year, yet you can go F some guy you met at work while I sit like an idiot waiting for my junior high like date." This of course caused her to go into hysterics and the therapist asked me to leave. I apologized and told her to text me if she wants to keep working this out. I get that text later that day. Now she is all chatty and crap telling me that this was the worst mistake of her life and please talk to her. I tell her that I don't know if I can go on with this but agree to meet her. I flat out tell her right up front when I see her that for me to even consider going forward with this that she has to cut this other guy off, period. She tells me that is impossible because they work together and I tell her that I'm sorry but I won't even consider it if she is going to see this guy every day. She decides to find another job and after talking with my sister who I have told everything to, she said that while it is not common, some women do attempt to have intimacy after being attacked so that they feel like they have power again. Now why I am not the one who she did this with I have no idea, but I know I feel like I am being punished for something I did not even do. She changes jobs and we go back to our lunches and I do this twice when I tell her that I am getting a little tired of just meeting for lunch and doing nothing else, so she agrees to come over to watch TV with me. That has been it up until tonight. Tonight she came over and we watched 2 movies and ate pizza. During the second movie I tried to give her a kiss. Nothing more, just a kiss. She backs away as though I was a cross and she was a vampire and tells me she is not ready for that yet. Okay, not my finest moment here I admit, but I tell her that it's been a year and a month and I have not tried one goddamn thing with her or forced her into anything, and yet she willingly F some other guy months ago, but here I am still waiting to hold hands. She of course starts crying, but this time I'm not as fast to apologize. I do apologize for the tone of my voice and tell her that I would never try and force her to do anything against her will, but honestly I feel like I have been kept on the outside. I've been cheated on. I don't give 2 craps what they call it. She willingly had unprotected intimacy with someone else, and I feel like I have done everything to try and be a supportive boyfriend. I tell her that honestly I don't want her to text me until I decide what I'm going to do. I don't want to be unfair to her, but by the same token a year is a long time and we are really no closer to being back to normal than we were 6 months ago, and I have no idea how long this will go on. Now here is the part where if you didn't think I was jerk before, you will now. I am just tired of not having intimacy. Look, I certainly understood not trying anything right afterwards and even months afterwards, but it's been over a year and we're not even holding hands, and frankly the fact that she has been with someone else since this incident is unaliving me inside. So I told her that I'm going to think things through and promise to talk with her next week sometime. But as it stands tonight I think I'm done. I love her. I hate the idiot who ruined both of our lives. I know this isn't her fault and I hate that I feel like crap no matter what I do. If I stay I'm going to be resentful, and even if she comes over tomorrow and has intimacy with me it will feel like either pity intimacy or desperation intimacy. But I know ending this will be punishing her for something that isn't her fault either. Advice? My god, this is way too long. TL, Dr. GF was roped over a year ago. In the meantime I have given her space and let her deal with things as she deems fit. We have not been together intimately since the attack. She on the other hand has been with another guy since. I think I'm done but looking for advice. Spoke up when my father-in-law decided to stop paying for my sister-in-law's wedding after she accused me of baby trapping her brother. Now his family blames me for causing drama. I, 24F, had my surprise pregnancy celebration last weekend at our apartment. We deliberately kept the gathering small and intimate, just my boyfriend Nate, 25, our immediate families, and a handful of our closest friends. Nate and I have been dating for almost 3 years now, having met during our final year at university through mutual friends. 4 months ago, I made the significant decision to move in with him after discovering I was pregnant with our first child. I was honestly terrified at first when I saw those 2 pink lines on the test. We're both relatively young, still in the early stages of building our professional careers, and hadn't previously experienced living together under the same roof. Additionally, our respective families had only met on a few occasions and barely knew each other beyond surface-level pleasantries. But despite all these potential complications, we both genuinely wanted this baby and felt a connection to the life growing inside me, so we mutually decided to make this new arrangement work regardless of the challenges ahead. After several long conversations about our future, we agreed we would get formally engaged soon and then marry properly after the baby arrives and things settle down into a new normal. My family was completely supportive from the very start of our announcement, offering assistance and expressing genuine excitement about becoming grandparents and aunts and uncles. However, Nate's older sister Vanessa, 29, and his mother Caroline underwent what could only be described as a complete personality transformation toward me immediately after Nate officially announced the pregnancy and our future plans to both families. Before this revelation, they had always presented themselves as friendly, welcoming, and seemingly approving of our relationship whenever we interacted at family gatherings or holidays. Afterward, their demeanor transformed dramatically into something cold, noticeably distant, and increasingly passive-aggressive with each encounter, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere whenever we were in the same room together. Several days after the announcement, Nate later confided in me that they had confronted him privately about the entire situation when I wasn't present. Despite them explicitly swearing him to absolute secrecy and making him promise not to reveal their conversation to me under any circumstances, he felt compelled to tell me everything they had said behind closed doors. Their numerous objections ultimately boiled down to two primary issues that they couldn't seem to move past. First, Vanessa was already in the process of getting married to her boyfriend of 5 years in just 3 months' time, and she adamantly felt that our pregnancy news was deliberately stealing attention and focus from her important moment in the spotlight that she had been planning for over a year. Second, and significantly more insulting to my character and integrity, they openly suspected that I had deliberately and calculatingly gotten pregnant as part of some master scheme to permanently secure my place in their family, specifically because of their comfortable financial status and standing in the community. To provide some necessary context regarding our respective financial backgrounds, Nate's family is undeniably comfortable financially and has been established in the community for generations. His father Richard owns and operates a highly successful regional construction company that employs over 50 people and handles major commercial and residential projects throughout the state. Caroline, meanwhile, manages their extensive real estate investment portfolio consisting of multiple rental properties and commercial buildings across several neighboring counties. They live in a spacious house in an exclusive neighborhood with all the amenities that come with financial success accumulated over decades of hard work and smart investments. In contrast, my parents both work respectable but modest positions in healthcare administration at the same regional medical center. We're solidly middle class but certainly not wealthy by any reasonable standard. We've always lived comfortably enough, but without the luxuries and financial security that Nate's family enjoys as a matter of course. Given this disparity, their accusation that I had deliberately engineered this pregnancy as some calculated social climbing strategy to improve my economic situation was not just offensive but deeply, personally hurtful on multiple levels. It completely discounted the genuine feelings Nate and I had developed for each other over 3 years together. Thankfully, Nate didn't believe or entertain any of these insulting insinuations for even a moment and immediately told me everything so I wouldn't be unexpectedly blindsided by their increasingly cold behavior without understanding the root cause behind it. Despite the hurt caused by these accusations, we ultimately didn't cut contact completely with Vanessa and Caroline because Richard specifically and repeatedly asked everyone involved to maintain the peace for the sake of family harmony. The family had several significant life events approaching on the calendar, including Vanessa's planned wedding in just 3 months and eventually our own ceremony sometime after the baby's arrival, and Richard expressly wanted to avoid any public displays of family discord or dramatic confrontations that might overshadow these important occasions. Since Richard had consistently defended me from the very beginning of this uncomfortable situation and shown genuine kindness toward me when others in his family had not, we reluctantly agreed to remain outwardly civil with Caroline and Vanessa primarily out of respect for him and his wishes, rather than any desire to maintain relationships with them. As my pregnancy progressed and became increasingly visible, Richard thoughtfully suggested that Nate and I should consider getting formally engaged somewhat sooner than we had initially planned. His reasoning centered around the fact that I was noticeably starting to show, and he believed an official engagement would present a more favorable impression to their extended family members, business associates, and broader social circle who might otherwise gossip or make judgments about our situation. We were genuinely comfortable with that recommendation anyway as it aligned with our existing intentions, so we proceeded with the engagement and arranged a modest celebration afterward to mark the occasion with close friends and family. However, rather than improving the situation, Vanessa and Caroline appeared substantially more upset and agitated following our engagement announcement, making increasingly frequent and pointedly unsubtle remarks within earshot about how our timing was uncomfortably and suspiciously close to Vanessa's planned wedding celebration, as though we were deliberately attempting to overshadow her special day. I genuinely struggled to comprehend the basis of their persistent concern regarding our timeline. We had repeatedly clarified on multiple occasions during family gatherings that we absolutely wouldn't consider getting married until well after the baby was born, and we had adjusted to parenthood, and even following that, we would realistically need several additional months to properly plan a wedding ceremony that would satisfy both families. By any reasonable calculation, Our eventual wedding would likely occur at minimum 10 to 12 months after Vanessa's celebration, making any competition for attention completely irrelevant given the substantial separation in time between the two events. The tension finally exploded into open conflict during my pregnancy celebration last weekend. Without any warning or preceding conversation, Vanessa deliberately approached me while I was speaking with some friends and pointedly asked to examine my engagement ring up close. When I innocently extended my hand to show her the ring Nate had selected, she loudly commented within hearing distance of several nearby guests about how expensive the diamond and setting must have been, drawing unwanted attention to our interaction. She then proceeded to make what she later claimed was merely a joke that even if Nate ultimately decided against marrying me after the baby arrived, my child and I could certainly pawn the ring and live quite comfortably for quite a while on the proceeds. Before anyone could respond to this inappropriate comment, she further added with a thin smile that I should make sure to keep it safe in a secure location in case my obvious plan to baby trap her brother doesn't ultimately work out as intended. Every single person standing within proximity clearly heard her deliberately loud comments as the room momentarily fell uncomfortably silent. She delivered these highly inappropriate remarks with a smile plastered across her face and followed them with a forced laugh, but tellingly, only Caroline joined in with her own unconvincing chuckle while everyone else remained awkwardly silent or looked away in embarrassment. I stood there completely speechless, unable to formulate any kind of response to such an unexpected and public attack on my character and intentions. Nate immediately started confronting his sister with visible anger building in his expression, but before he could fully articulate his outrage, Richard intervened first, his face flushed with embarrassment as he sternly demanded that Vanessa apologize immediately for her inexcusable behavior toward a pregnant woman at her own celebration. When Vanessa stubbornly refused his direct request, repeatedly insisting with defensiveness that it was just a harmless joke that everyone was overreacting to, Richard made an announcement that clearly surprised everyone present. If she was so deeply concerned about potential gold diggers infiltrating their family, then perhaps she should demonstrate her financial independence by paying for her own elaborate wedding entirely because he personally wouldn't contribute another single cent toward the considerable expenses she had planned. That particularly tense moment is when I finally managed to find my voice after the initial shock had somewhat subsided and said, with more confidence than I actually felt, that I genuinely thought Richard's suggestion was an excellent and appropriate idea given the circumstances and Vanessa's expressed concerns about financial motivations. Without hesitation, Richard immediately confirmed his decision on the spot to completely withdraw all financial support previously promised for Vanessa's upcoming wedding. Absolute chaos instantly followed this declaration. Shouting erupted from multiple directions, tears started flowing, accusations began flying indiscriminately across the room from various family members. My increasingly uncomfortable friends quickly made excuses and left the hostile environment, leaving only our respective immediate families remaining in the apartment. The heated argument continued unabated for what subjectively felt like endless hours of circular accusations. My visibly upset parents, increasingly protective Nate, resolute Richard and my overwhelmed self positioned firmly on one side of the living room, while Vanessa and defensive Caroline remained stubbornly entrenched on the opposite side, neither willing to acknowledge any wrongdoing whatsoever. Eventually, as the argument showed no signs of reaching any productive resolution and my stress levels continued escalating dangerously, I firmly told Vanessa and Caroline they needed to leave immediately because I was becoming excessively upset by the continuing conflict, which medical professionals had specifically warned me was potentially harmful for the developing baby. After they finally stormed out with additional muttered comments under their breath, Richard conscientiously stayed behind to offer a sincere apology for the entire uncomfortable situation and explicitly told me that I absolutely no longer needed to maintain any sort of polite facade or pretense with them moving forward. He emphasized that he completely understood if I wanted nothing whatsoever to do with either of them following this unfortunate incident. I graciously accepted his heartfelt apology, recognizing that beneath his initially strict insistence on maintaining family harmony, he was fundamentally just an old-school, traditional family man genuinely trying his best to hold his increasingly fractured family together against progressively impossible odds and circumstances beyond his control. In the tense days following this unfortunate confrontation, Nate and I have deliberately stopped all direct communication with members of his immediate family with the exception of Richard, who continues to check in on us periodically with genuine concern. Despite our clear boundary setting, Vanessa and Caroline have been relentlessly bombarding Nate's phone with numerous accusatory text messages and voicemails at all hours, dramatically claiming that I have single-handedly completely destroyed everything within their previously harmonious family dynamic. Their messages repeatedly emphasize how they supposedly don't know how they'll possibly afford the elaborate wedding arrangements at this late stage, that Richard has stopped speaking entirely to Caroline despite their decades-long marriage, and somehow, inexplicably, I personally need to fix everything that has gone wrong, as though the entire situation stems from my actions rather than Vanessa's inappropriate public behavior. Nate is increasingly and visibly stressed by this continuous onslaught of guilt-inducing communication despite repeatedly insisting to me that he genuinely wants absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with their unnecessary dramatic behavior and manipulative tactics. I cannot help but feel at least partially responsible for the escalation because I did openly encourage Richard's spontaneous decision to withdraw the previously promised wedding funding, which undeniably escalated the already tense situation to an entirely different level of family conflict. So considering all these complicated circumstances, Ida for vocally supporting my future father-in-law's impulsive decision to completely stop paying for my sister-in-law's planned wedding? Edit, to thoroughly clarify exactly how the wedding finances were originally supposed to function, since numerous people in the comments have been asking about the specific arrangements and expressing confusion about the financial implications of Richard's decision. Both Nate and Vanessa have had separate wedding funds gradually established by their parents over many years, intended to help cover their eventual marriage celebrations. For Vanessa's wedding ceremony and reception scheduled for 3 months from now, she and her fiancé Alex's family had already covered the substantial deposits and various required advance payments to secure venues, catering services, floral arrangements, photography packages, and other essential wedding elements. According to the family's established financial arrangement that had been agreed upon months ago, Richard was planning to handle all the remaining considerable expenses associated with the celebration and additionally write Vanessa a comprehensive check shortly after the wedding ceremony to fully reimburse everything that she had already personally spent from her savings to secure these services. That particular arrangement had been specifically designed to simplify the potentially complicated process of managing wedding finances across multiple parties and ensure Vanessa wouldn't need to deplete her personal savings for an extended period. But now, given the current circumstances and Richard's firm decision, since all the elaborate arrangements have already been formally established with vendors through mostly non-refundable deposits and contractual obligations, Vanessa realistically cannot back out of any of these financial commitments without losing significant amounts of money that has already changed hands. If Richard maintains his position and doesn't reimburse her as originally planned, she'll be completely stuck paying for everything herself without the financial safety net she had been counting on throughout the entire planning process. Her fiancé Alex and his extended family unfortunately find themselves in a surprisingly similar financial situation to mine, generally comfortable in their day-to-day lives but certainly not wealthy enough to comfortably afford the extraordinarily extravagant wedding celebration that Vanessa had enthusiastically planned under the assumption of her father's financial backing. Consequently, they now find themselves in genuinely serious financial trouble with the wedding date rapidly approaching and numerous financial obligations that cannot be easily cancelled or modified without substantial penalties. Update 1. After reading through countless comments and reflecting deeply on the situation, I finally gathered the courage to have a genuine heart-to-heart conversation with Nate about everything he's been silently going through during this family conflict. I approached the discussion carefully, asking if he harbored any feelings of resentment or disappointment toward me specifically, since I undeniably did play a significant role in escalating this complicated family mess by openly supporting Richard's financial decision. He immediately and emphatically assured me that while he's understandably distressed about the overall deteriorating family situation and ongoing tension, I'm absolutely the last person he would ever consider blaming for any of it. He stated, looking directly into my eyes, that he's actually quite proud that I finally found the strength to stand up for myself after months of silently enduring subtle insults and passive-aggressive behavior from his mother and sister. During our lengthy conversation, he thoughtfully pointed out that my seemingly impulsive comment supporting Richard's financial decision wasn't remotely unfair or unreasonable under the circumstances, especially considering the broader context of how Vanessa and Caroline had consistently and repeatedly implied through numerous subtle comments over recent months that I was nothing more than a calculating gold digger deliberately trying to trap him into a permanent relationship through pregnancy. He expressed with genuine emotion that he simply cannot imagine how extraordinarily difficult and emotionally draining these past several months must have been for me on a daily basis, constantly pretending everything was perfectly fine during family gatherings while simultaneously knowing exactly what they truly thought about my character and intentions behind my back. He acknowledged that while they had at least previously maintained enough basic decorum to keep their deeply offensive opinions relatively private rather than confronting me directly to my face, Vanessa's public so-called joke delivered deliberately at my own pregnancy celebration had clearly crossed an unacceptable line of basic human decency, and he was genuinely relieved and glad that I had finally summoned the courage to say something in response rather than continuing to silently absorb their increasingly obvious hostility and disrespect. As our conversation continued well into the evening, Nate carefully explained that his increasingly visible stress primarily stems from his growing realization that Vanessa and Caroline almost certainly won't simply let this significant conflict naturally resolve itself or fade away with time as he had initially hoped might happen. He revealed that in the early stages of this family tension, he had privately maintained some hope that we might all eventually reconcile through open communication and mutual understanding, But based on their recent escalating behavior and increasingly hostile messages, that positive outcome now seems increasingly unlikely with each passing day. What's genuinely bothering him on a profound emotional level, he confessed quietly, is the increasingly distressing prospect that this painful family rift will remain unresolved and possibly even worsen by the time our innocent baby arrives in just a few months. As he explained his perspective with increasing emotional vulnerability, I found myself completely understanding and empathizing with his complicated feelings about the situation. I reflected honestly that I would undoubtedly feel exactly the same conflicted way if members of my own family were behaving so irrationally and creating such unnecessary drama during what should be a joyful time of celebration and preparation. Until this crucial conversation, I had been conscientiously giving him considerable emotional space and distance, genuinely believing that solitude and time for independent reflection was precisely what he needed to process everything that had transpired between his family members. However, after hearing the depth of his emotional struggle during our extended heart-to-heart discussion, I instinctively reached out and hugged him tightly without saying anything further, which unexpectedly became the emotional catalyst that caused him to break down completely in a way I had never witnessed from him before throughout our entire relationship. Over the next hour, he vulnerably poured out his deeply conflicted feelings with remarkable honesty, expressing how emotionally torn and divided he feels because despite their inexcusable behavior and hurtful actions, they fundamentally remain his mother and sister, his core family who had been present throughout his entire life before I entered the picture. He expressed with genuine sincerity that he genuinely wants them to be actively present in our child's life and development, creating those special family bonds and memories that he treasures from his own childhood. But simultaneously he firmly insists they must sincerely apologize to me directly and make genuine efforts to repair the damage their actions have caused before any reconciliation can possibly occur. The fundamental problem complicating any potential resolution is that Vanessa and Caroline remain absolutely convinced against all evidence and reason that this entire unfortunate situation is exclusively my fault and responsibility. According to their distorted perspective that Nate has gathered from their numerous text messages, they firmly believe that Richard would have only temporarily threatened to withdraw the substantial wedding funding as a momentary disciplinary bluff designed to make Vanessa apologize in the moment, but never would have actually followed through with implementing such a consequential financial decision without my specific verbal encouragement that allegedly pushed him beyond his original intentions. During our conversation, I logically asked Nate the question that many outside observers would naturally wonder: why couldn't Vanessa and Caroline simply adjust their expectations and pay for the upcoming wedding themselves given their respective financial resources, considering that Vanessa undeniably has a well-compensated professional position with considerable discretionary income, and Caroline actively manages their family's substantial and reportedly profitable real estate investment portfolio that generates significant passive income. His response revealed the true complexity underneath the surface conflict. He carefully explained that at this point, it has fundamentally evolved beyond a simple financial matter into primarily an ego issue and power struggle for them both. They adamantly insist that Richard should fulfill his financial obligation precisely because he had explicitly promised he would contribute substantially to the wedding expenses many months ago during the initial planning stages, and they simply cannot psychologically accept or process that he's unexpectedly breaking that significant promise specifically because of me and my perceived negative influence over his decision-making process. Despite their relentless communication attempts, Nate has deliberately chosen not to respond to any of their increasingly desperate and accusatory messages flooding his phone, maintaining a firm boundary that he established immediately following the incident. However, his silence has not discouraged them whatsoever, as they persistently continue trying various manipulative tactics designed to make him experience intensifying feelings of guilt and familial responsibility for their current predicament. They repeatedly and forcefully insist through multiple daily messages that I personally should somehow magically fix the deteriorating situation between all parties involved, apparently expecting me to convince Richard to reverse his financial decision despite the circumstances, even though everyone directly involved in the situation, including Richard himself, clearly recognizes that they're unquestionably the individuals who should be sincerely apologizing to me for their inappropriate public behavior rather than continuing to deflect responsibility. The continually escalating tension surrounding this family conflict has unfortunately been consuming Nate's mental and emotional energy almost entirely during what should be a joyful time of preparation for our baby's arrival, making it increasingly difficult for him to properly focus on anything else important in his professional or personal life, including preparations for the significant life changes approaching with parenthood. Update 2. It's been about 10 days since the celebration disaster. This morning, I unexpectedly heard from Caroline and Vanessa after their extended silent treatment. I hadn't blocked them because I wanted to leave open the possibility of an apology, however unlikely that seemed. When Caroline called this morning, I answered immediately but set immediate boundaries. I told her up front that if she was calling to argue or convince me I was wrong, she should hang up right now because I wasn't interested. I'd only continue the conversation if she was calling to apologize. When she stayed on the line, I let her speak. Caroline and Vanessa, apparently on speakerphone together, proceeded to apologize for their behavior. They admitted they'd been petty and inappropriate, especially given my advanced pregnancy when they should have been reducing my stress, not increasing it. They acknowledged hurting not just me but also Nate and Richard, which was never their intention. They said the family breakdown was entirely their fault, despite initially trying to blame me. They explained they'd spent days trying to justify their behavior and pin responsibility on me, but eventually had to face the truth: they were in the wrong. Their pride had prevented them from apologizing sooner because they didn't think I deserved it, but they'd finally reached a point where they felt ashamed of their actions. They asked if I would consider forgiving them and joining them, along with Nate and Richard, for dinner to resolve our misunderstandings. I was caught off guard and didn't have an immediate answer. I told them I needed time to think. Their behavior had hurt not just me but also Nate and Richard deeply, and I couldn't speak for anyone but myself. I explained that if I wasn't pregnant, this might be simpler, but my priority right now is avoiding emotional distress. Our last interaction had been incredibly draining, and I'm not eager to risk a repeat experience. I needed time to decide whether I want them in my life and if forgiveness is possible. I also clarified that I couldn't promise resolving things with me would fix their relationships with Nate and Richard, nor could I commit to a dinner gathering yet. They were silent for a moment before saying they understood my position. While disappointed I couldn't immediately forgive them, they asked if I would at least tell Nate they had apologized. They explained that after ignoring their messages, he had finally blocked them entirely, and they felt terrible about everything. Even if I couldn't forgive them yet, they would consider it a huge favor if I could help them reconnect with Nate. I was unsure how to respond because while I knew Nate wanted reconciliation, his decision to block them likely had good reasons behind it. I told them I would let him know about their apology, but whether he unblocked them would be entirely his decision. I wouldn't involve myself further. They seemed disappointed but grateful that I would at least pass along the message. Before ending the call, they apologized specifically for suggesting I was only with Nate for financial gain. They acknowledged that my actions proved I cared about him more than anyone, perhaps even more than they did. Otherwise, they said, I wouldn't have even taken their call or considered helping them despite everything. I simply confirmed they were right about that. The one thing we all had in common was loving Nate and wanting his happiness. After that, we ended the call. Update 3, it's been a few days since that phone call. I told Nate about his mother and sister's apology but made it clear the decision to reconnect with them was entirely his. I mentioned their request but assured him there was no pressure either way. He told me he still needs time to process his feelings and isn't ready to make a decision yet. For now, all he wants is peace and quality time with me and our soon-to-arrive baby. His routine is simple these days: work, then home to me. Since I'm on maternity leave, I'm home most of the time. I've been using this time to create a happy, calm environment for us, cooking his favorite meals and making our home comfortable. The sweetest part is that he comes home with little surprises he knows I'll like, without me asking. And whenever he's home, he talks to our baby through my belly, which melts my heart every time. These past few days have been wonderfully peaceful. We haven't discussed family drama at all. Richard checks in occasionally, but that's our only contact with his side of the family. Today, though, Nate asked if I'd be comfortable with him speaking to Caroline and Vanessa again. I told him I'd fully support that decision because I know reconciliation is important to him. As we prepare to begin this new chapter of our lives in just a few weeks, letting go of past hurt seems like the healthiest choice. If he's ready to forgive his mother and sister, I'm on board. We decided to call Richard first for his perspective. He'd already cautiously resumed communication with Caroline and Vanessa a few days ago, not because everything was resolved, but because sharing a house with your wife without speaking becomes unsustainable after a while. Things between them were civil but definitely not back to normal. The same applied to his interactions with Vanessa, who had been visiting frequently. Richard enthusiastically supported the idea of a family dinner, believing it would help resolve the lingering awkwardness. With his blessing, we called Caroline and proposed dinner this weekend. She immediately agreed and conferenced in Vanessa, who was equally eager. So this weekend, we'll all have dinner together and hopefully begin healing these family wounds. I know some might disagree with my decision to give them another chance, but I believe in second chances. Everyone, including myself, has needed forgiveness at some point. With our baby arriving soon, starting this new chapter with peace rather than ongoing conflict feels right. I've discussed this with my parents, who agree I'm making the right choice. I don't feel the need to defend my decision, but I want to acknowledge up front that negative comments about reconciliation reflect more on the commenter than on me. This makes Nate happy, and I'm hopeful that by the time our baby arrives, we might actually feel like a normal, functional family again. Update 4, I apologize for disappearing for so long without updating. It's been several weeks, and I completely forgot to post here. So much has happened since my last update, starting with that dinner. The dinner went surprisingly well, better than I had dared to hope. Caroline and Vanessa offered sincere, heartfelt apologies right away, expressing genuine shame over their behavior, which they admitted was tacky and completely unwarranted given how I'd always treated them with respect. Their sincerity caught me off guard, and I initially remained cautious. But in the weeks following the dinner, they demonstrated real change, visiting regularly, offering help with baby preparations, and consistently showing they wanted to repair our relationship. After witnessing this sustained effort, I gradually opened my heart to forgiveness. Then last week, I went into labor with both our families present for support. When our daughter finally arrived, the joy in the room was huge, perhaps the purest happiness our families had shared in months. Since then, life with Nate and our daughter has been beautiful. My parents, Richard and Caroline, and even Vanessa and her fiancé have been incredibly supportive, sending gifts and offering help so Nate and I can focus entirely on the baby. That's my life now, completely consumed with our newborn in the best possible way. I'm grateful everything worked out and that our daughter will grow up surrounded by family who love her. My little one is getting fussy, so I need to go, but I wanted to share that sometimes, with patience and forgiveness, even the most broken family situations can heal.
My college advisor pointed at my ripped jeans after I came to her about assault, then said, "Why the F were you alone with him, especially wearing that?" When I asked why she was letting him get away, she rolled her eyes and said, "You're confusing life with a fairy tale. Boys will be boys." I didn't say a word. That was 4 semesters ago. Yesterday she was escorted off campus, her office door locked from the outside. My entire university was a safe haven for ARPists. On the first day, they gave us an hour-long presentation on boundaries. The lecturer was an old man who still used a Nokia block phone. He had long white hair, beady eyes, very expensive suit. 90% of campus attacks involved alcohol. Now what does this tell us? The room went silent. Girls that drink are 90% more likely to be assaulted. So the solution is simple. No alcohol, no problem. I sat there with my mouth hanging open, but quickly closed it shut when I noticed one of the guys across the room staring at me and grabbing the bulge through his shorts. That's when I got the notification. It was my roommate Rachel texting me even though we were right beside each other. She told me that her sister went to the university and was told by her sorority sisters to never report anything. I pinched the bridge of my nose because Rachel was bright and bubbly, the type to exaggerate things for comedic effect. So I just replied saying, "No way," before turning my phone off. But a week later, I realized I was part of the problem because when I met my tour guide a week later and joked about what Rachel said, her face fell. I furrowed my eyebrows, not knowing what was wrong with what I said, and that's when told me. "I had reported one last year," she said, her voice so quiet it could have been mistaken for an exhale. "I lost my scholarship and had to borrow money from my dirt poor family just to afford rent." "What happened to the guy?" I asked. A part of me didn't even want to know the answer. Since I was deemed a liar, the university rewarded him for dealing with my BS. He was given my scholarship. My heart twisted. And one thing about me is that I am a girl's girl. If we have a crush on the same boy, I will let you have him. So now, seeing Sarah sit in front of me feeling completely helpless, I knew I had to do something. I didn't go to the police, didn't post anything about it. I didn't tell a soul, because I was ready to play the long game. I spent the next 2 semesters being the perfect student. I practically lived like a Mormon. Never drank, spent my weekends doing Chloe Ting workouts and attending study groups, deleted most traces of my social media. But in the end, none of it mattered. Because one day, I was the second one to show up to my science study group, and Jake was the first. I sat down beside him to be polite and stared at the ground to show him I didn't want to talk. But of course, he spoke anyway. "I'd like to see those pretty eyes do something other than study all day." I swear I thought he was pranking me, but that's when I got the "Jake is typing" notification on Snapchat. He had literally texted me saying, "I'll show you mine if you show me yours." And when I looked up at him, he had this huge smirk on his face. Dude actually believed he was Sir Isaac Riston, LOL. I thought the radio silence between us was enough for him to take the hint, but I was wrong. Because, well, let's just say I was soon faced with the contents of his "My Eyes Only." I immediately burst into tears and started hyperventilating. You see, the last time I had come into contact with anything asexual was when a man stole my innocence during childhood. I wasn't going to mention this part, but now I think it's relevant to the story. Anyway, there I was, crying my eyes out, when Jake put his hand on my back to comfort me, which soon turned into him trying to undo the clasp of my bra. I ran into the bathroom stall, practically rocking back and forth on the toilet seat. When I finally stopped, I decided I had had enough and stormed towards my advisor to ask about reporting. I expected her to comfort me, or at least tell me the procedures, but no. Why the F were you alone with him, especially wearing that?" She then pointed to my ripped jeans like they were to blame. I just smiled and walked away because I had an ace up my sleeve, one that I didn't want to pull out unless I absolutely had to. My daddy was a rich lawyer. He was the one who had put my childhood ARPist away, and I knew he would do anything for me. And I had just recorded our entire conversation. I called my dad that night. He listened to the recording 3 times without saying a word. Then he told me to document everything and keep my head down for now. He said he'd file the complaint himself but needed more evidence first. I trusted him completely. The next morning, Jake was already spreading rumors about me. Apparently, I was unstable and making things up for attention. His fraternity brothers started showing up everywhere I went. They'd sit behind me in the library taking photos. They'd follow me to the dining hall and film me eating. One of them even stood outside my dorm room for 20 minutes just staring at the door. I kept my phone recording constantly. Sarah texted me that night asking if I was okay. She said she recognized what was happening because they did the same thing to her. I told her I was fine, but she could hear the fear in my voice through text somehow. Rachel started acting weird around me. She'd leave the room whenever I entered. She stopped inviting me to lunch. I figured Jake's crew had gotten to her too. Then one night she broke down crying. She told me they'd sent her anonymous messages about her scholarship. They said if she she kept being my friend, they'd make sure she lost it. That's when she finally told me the truth about her sister. Her sister was Jake's first victim 2 years ago. She had to drop out after losing her scholarship. Rachel had been carrying that secret since freshman year. I hugged her and told her it wasn't her fault. We both cried for like an hour. The university started their investigation, but it moved at a snail's pace. They scheduled my first interview for 3 weeks out. Meanwhile, my grades started dropping mysteriously. Assignments I'd submitted on time were marked late. Tests I'd aced came back with failing grades. My attendance records showed absences on days I was definitely in class. Someone with admin access was messing with my records. I screenshot everything and sent it to my dad. He hired a private investigator immediately. The PI started digging into Jake's background and connections at the school. Turns out Jake's uncle worked in the administration office. The same uncle who handled Sarah's case, the same uncle who handled Rachel's sister's case. The pattern was obvious. They called me in for a mandatory meeting with 3 administrators. They said Jake had filed a countercomplaint against me for harassment. They showed me edited screenshots of messages that made me look crazy. Messages I'd never sent. Someone had photoshopped whole conversations. I stayed calm and asked for copies of everything. They refused, said it was confidential. I recorded that too. My dad's PI discovered the administrator helping Jake was definitely his uncle. The guy had been there for 15 years. He had access to everything. Student records, complaint files, security footage. He could make anything disappear. And apparently he had been doing exactly that for years. I came back to my dorm one day to find it completely ransacked. Nothing was stolen, but everything was touched. My underwear drawer was dumped on the bed. My laptop was moved. My photos were scattered on the floor. It was a message. They wanted me to know they could get to me whenever they wanted. I installed a hidden camera after that. Sarah reached out again and asked to meet in person. We met at a coffee shop off campus. She looked around nervously the whole time. Then she told me she'd kept copies of everything from her case. The security footage that supposedly got corrupted. The original complaint that supposedly got lost. Even emails from Jake's uncle telling her to drop the case or face consequences. She'd been too scared to do anything with it. Rachel's sister agreed to meet me too. She still had her original paperwork. The documents the university claimed never existed. She showed me emails from administrators gaslighting her, telling her she was confused about what happened, telling her she was ruining a good young man's future. We started a group chat with encrypted messaging. Just me, Sarah, Rachel, and her sister at first. Then Sarah knew another girl. That girl knew 2 more. Within a week, we had 7 victims all sharing their stories, all with similar experiences, all involving Jake or his friends, all handled by his uncle. Rachel decided to go undercover. She started hanging out with Jake's friend group, pretending she ditched me for them. They bought it immediately. Guys like that always think girls will choose them over their friends. She learned about their group chats, their shared drives, the way they talked about us like we were conquests, like trophies. One night she texted me frantically. She'd gotten into one of their laptops at a party, found a folder labeled wins. It was full of photos and videos of girls from our school, some clearly taken without consent, some showing girls who were obviously too hammered to know what was happening. I felt sick, but we finally had real evidence. My dad's PI had been building a timeline, tracking down former students who'd transferred suddenly, following paper trails of complaints that went nowhere. He found 12 victims over 5 years, 12 girls who'd been failed by the same system, by the same administrator, by the same group of guys who thought they were untouchable. Jake started getting bolder. He'd show up wherever I was, stand just close enough to make me uncomfortable, close enough that I could smell his cologne, the same cologne from that day in the study room. He'd smirk at me, whisper things when no one else could hear, tell me I should just give up, tell me no one would believe me, tell me I was wasting my time. His uncle called me in for another meeting, told me my grades were slipping, that maybe I should consider transferring, that this environment might not be healthy for me. I smiled and nodded and recorded every word. He had no idea what was coming. The other girls were getting braver too. We met in person for the first time, all 7 of us in Sarah's apartment. We compared notes, shared evidence, cried together, laughed together, felt less alone. Some of them had been carrying this weight for years. Finally, having people who believed them changed everything. Rachel kept feeding us information from the inside. Jake's group was planning something big for the upcoming party. They were joking about finding fresh meat, about teaching the uptight girls a lesson. She recorded everything on her phone. We knew we had to act soon. My dad had been working with his legal team, building an airtight case, but he said we needed one more thing. We needed Jake to admit what he'd done, to implicate himself and his uncle, to show the pattern clearly. It seemed impossible. Guys like Jake don't confess. They deny until the end. But I had an idea. I knew Jake's biggest weakness was his ego. He couldn't resist bragging about his conquests, his connections, his untouchable status on campus. So I set up a meeting with him in the library, 3rd floor, back corner, the same spot where everything started 3 months ago. I made sure to arrive early, found a table with good acoustics, and tested my recording app multiple times. The little red dot blinked steadily. Then I waited, watching students filter past with their coffee cups and heavy backpacks, oblivious to what was about to happen. He showed up 20 minutes late on purpose. Classic power move. He sauntered in wearing his usual uniform, khakis, boat shoes, that navy polo with his fraternity letters embroidered on the chest. He sat down across from me with that same smirk that used to make my skin crawl. Now it just made me more determined. I kept my face neutral, channeling every acting class I'd ever taken. Told him I wanted to talk about dropping my complaint. His eyes lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. He leaned back in his chair like he'd already won, man-spreading and taking up more space than necessary. I fed him exactly what he wanted to hear, each word carefully rehearsed. Said I was tired of fighting the system, that my grades were suffering from all the stress, that I just wanted to move on with my life and forget this whole mess. He ate it up like the privileged predator he was. Started talking about how smart I was being, how this was best for everyone involved, how glad he was that I finally understood how things worked in the real world. Then I played dumb, widening my eyes just enough to seem naive. Asked him why the university was so against me, why they seemed to take his side immediately without even investigating properly. That's when his ego took over completely. He started bragging about his uncle, the dean of student affairs, about how many times his uncle had handled situations like this, about how the system was designed to protect guys like him from misunderstandings. He actually used air quotes. I kept asking innocent questions, tilting my head like I was genuinely curious. He kept answering, getting more animated with each response. Told me about Sarah, the scholarship student from last year who'd tried to report him, about Rachel's sister who'd been too traumatized to even finish filing paperwork, even mentioned names I didn't recognize, Jessica, Maria, Ashley, girls who'd left school suddenly mid-semester, girls who'd been too scared dared to even file reports. He was practically glowing with pride, like he was recounting sports victories instead of destroying lives. Rachel was positioned at another table 15 feet away, recording from a different angle with her laptop camera aimed our way. She'd told Jake's friends she was studying for organic chemistry there. They didn't suspect anything. Why would they? She'd been hanging with them for weeks now, laughing at their stupid jokes, pretending to be impressed by their trust funds, playing the role perfectly while documenting every disgusting thing they said. Jake leaned in close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and suffocating. His breath smelled like energy drinks and arrogance. He told me I should be grateful for this opportunity, that other girls hadn't been given this chance to walk away clean, that his uncle usually made things much harder for troublemakers who didn't know their place, that I was lucky he liked me enough to offer this deal. Then he made his biggest mistake. He pulled out his phone, the latest iPhone in a designer case, to show me something. Said he wanted me to understand what I was up against if I continued with my complaint. He opened that shared drive Rachel had told us about, the one they called their trophy room, scrolled through folders full of girls' names, each one a person whose life they'd documented and violated, clicked on one labeled Melissa_2019 to show me what they had on some poor girl from last year, photos taken without consent, screenshots of private messages, even her class schedule and home address. I felt sick but kept my face calm, gripping my hands together under the table so he wouldn't see them shaking. Asked him how many girls were in there. He laughed, actually laughed, and said he'd lost count after 50. Said his uncle helped them keep everything organized in case any of the girls tried to cause problems later, that they had stuff going back years, a whole archive of leverage, that no one could touch them because they owned this place, because his family had donated millions to the university. Rachel texted me a thumbs up emoji. She'd managed to screenshot everything while he was distracted bragging to me, had even gotten a clear shot of his phone screen. We had him, but I needed one more thing, the final piece. I asked him directly about that day in the study room, said I wanted to understand what I'd done wrong so I could avoid such misunderstandings in the future. His whole demeanor changed instantly. The fake charm disappeared. He got this dark look in his eyes, the real Jake showing through. Told me I'd done nothing wrong, that he knew exactly what he was doing, that he just wanted to see if I was really as pure and untouchable as I pretended to be, that girls like me needed to be taught lessons about the real world, that I should be thanking him for only showing me pictures instead of taking his own. I thanked him for explaining everything so clearly, said I understood now how things really worked, got up to leave, moving slowly and deliberately. He grabbed my wrist as I passed, not hard enough to leave marks but firm enough to make his point clear. His fingers felt like shackles, told me to remember our conversation, that if I changed my mind about dropping the complaint, things would get much worse for me, that his uncle had connections at every university in the state. I nodded and pulled away, resisting the urge to run, walked out slowly, counting each step, didn't run even though every instinct screamed at me to get away from him. Rachel followed a few minutes later, making a show of packing up her chemistry textbook. We met in the bathroom down the hall and hugged so tight I could barely breathe. Both of us were shaking, but we'd done it. We had everything we needed. That night, our group chat was buzzing with activity. Everyone had heard what happened through our network. Sarah started crying when she heard Jake mention her name on the recording, remembering her own encounter with him. Rachel's sister threw up when we told her about the folders, about seeing her name on that digital trophy list. But we all agreed it was time to move forward, to stop being victims and become fighters. My dad flew in the next day on the red-eye from Seattle. He listened to all the recordings in my dorm room, his face growing darker with each word, read through all the evidence on my laptop, taking detailed notes in his legal pad, met with each girl individually in the conference room he'd booked at a nearby hotel to hear their stories firsthand. He was building something bigger than just my case. He was building a pattern of behavior that couldn't be ignored or explained away. Jake must have sensed something was off because his behavior changed. He started getting paranoid, looking over his shoulder on campus, accused Rachel of being a spy in front of his whole friend group. She played it off perfectly, should have won an Oscar. Said I was spreading rumors about her because I was jealous, that she'd never betray them for some uptight girl who couldn't take a joke. Even cried fake tears that streaked her mascara. They bought it completely because they couldn't imagine a girl being that good at lying to them. His uncle called me in again the following week. This time he wasn't subtle about his threats. The pretense of caring about my well-being was gone. He told me directly that pursuing this would ruin my future, that no graduate school would accept someone with my reputation once he was done with me, that he had connections at every major university, every prominent research lab, that I'd never work in my field if I didn't drop this immediately. I just smiled and thanked him for his concern, watching his face turn red with frustration. The threats escalated after that meeting. Dead animals left outside my dorm, a rat, then a bird, each with a note saying, "You're next." My car tires slashed twice in 1 week, security cameras conveniently malfunctioning both times, fake social media accounts spreading lies about me, saying I was sleeping with professors for grades, photos of me taken without my knowledge posted online with horrible captions about what I supposedly did at parties I'd never attended. They were trying to break me down systematically. But something had changed in all of us. I wasn't alone anymore, wasn't isolated and afraid. The other girls formed a protection squad without even discussing it. We walked each other to class in groups, never letting anyone go alone. Studied together in public spaces with multiple exits. Ate together in the dining hall. Strength in numbers. Sarah taught us self-defense moves in her apartment, showing us how to break a grip, how to use our keys as weapons. Rachel's sister shared coping strategies from her therapy sessions. We became stronger together than any of us had been alone. My dad's legal team filed the official complaints on a Friday afternoon, both criminal charges and a federal Title IX complaint that was hundreds of pages thick, named Jake, 4 of his friends, and his uncle specifically, with detailed evidence for each charge. Included over 200 pages of evidence meticulously organized, recordings, screenshots, documents, witness statements from 12 different women, years of cover-ups laid bare in black and white. The courthouse clerk's eyes widened as she stamped each document. The university tried to keep it quiet at first, their PR machine spinning into overdrive, sent us all letters about confidentiality printed on official letterhead, about not discussing ongoing investigations with anyone, including the media, about protecting the reputation of the institution, and considering our futures. My dad laughed when he read mine, a harsh sound with no humor in it, said they were scared of the publicity, said they should be terrified. Jake was arrested the following Monday morning outside his fraternity house. I wasn't there, but Rachel saw it happen from across the quad. Said he tried to run when he saw the police cars, said he was screaming about his rights, about his father's lawyers, about about how we were ruining his life over nothing. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. He was finally experiencing a fraction of the fear he'd instilled in others. His friends were picked up throughout the week at various locations around campus. His uncle was the last to go, maintaining his arrogance until the end. They arrested him at his office during a meeting with donors, found boxes of files he was trying to destroy, papers still warm from the shredder, evidence of years of cover-ups, each file a story of injustice, names of victims we didn't even know about, going back 15 years. The investigation expanded beyond just our cases into something massive. More girls started coming forward from years past, emboldened by our action. Rachel finally dropped her cover in spectacular fashion, gathered Jake's remaining friends, and told them exactly what she thought of them. Said she'd recorded every disgusting thing they'd said over the past 2 months, that she had screenshots of all their group chats, their locker room talk, that their trophy folder was in FBI hands now, every sick photo and video cataloged as evidence. Some of them actually cried when they realized how thoroughly they'd been played. The university went into damage control mode immediately. Suddenly they cared about victim support and student safety. Suddenly they wanted to hear our stories and make changes. Suddenly they were sorry for how we'd been treated, how our reports had been mishandled. It was all fake concern, but at least things were changing. New administrators were brought in, people with actual experience in handling assault cases. Sarah got a call that changed everything for her. They were reinstating her scholarship that had been mysteriously revoked after she'd reported Jake, with back pay for the semester she'd missed. With a formal apology from the university president himself, she cried for hours on my dorm room floor. Her family had sacrificed so much, taken out loans they couldn't afford. Now she could finally finish her degree without that crushing burden. Rachel's sister decided to come back to school after dropping out 2 years prior. The university offered her a full ride to compensate for their failures, counseling support with therapists who specialized in trauma, whatever she needed to feel safe on campus. It had taken 2 years, but she was finally getting justice. She moved into our dorm building just down the hall, became part of our group officially, not just the girl we were fighting for. The trial prep was intense and exhausting. Jake's family hired expensive lawyers from a firm that specialized in defending privileged predators, tried to paint us as conspirators who'd planned this for attention, as jealous girls making things up because we'd been rejected. But the evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. The recordings were crystal clear. The pattern was established across years. Even their lawyers looked uncomfortable defending them during some of the depositions. My dad worked 18-hour days preparing our case, fueled by coffee and righteous anger. He brought in expert witnesses from across the country, trauma specialists who could explain our reactions, digital forensics experts who verified the authenticity of every piece of evidence, former university administrators who confirmed the systematic cover-ups they'd witnessed. He was building something that couldn't be torn down by expensive lawyers and family connections. Jake tried to contact me once through his lawyer, a last desperate attempt, wanted to apologize for the misunderstanding, wanted to make a deal that would make this all go away, said he'd admit to everything if I dropped the charges and convinced the others to do the same. My dad laughed so hard he cried actual tears, told them we had everything we needed for conviction, that deals were for people who had something to offer besides empty apologies. The other girls were incredible throughout everything, a support system I'd never imagined having. We had group therapy sessions in Sarah's apartment every Tuesday, movie nights where we didn't talk about any of it, just ate popcorn and watched comedies, dance parties in Sarah's living room where we screamed along to angry music. We were healing together slowly, building something new and strong from all that pain and fear. More evidence kept surfacing as the investigation deepened. Jake's uncle had been at this for over a decade, maybe longer. The trophy folder went back to when he first started working there, fresh out of graduate school. Some of those girls had graduated years ago, moved on with their lives, thought they'd left it all behind in the past. Now they were being contacted about testifying, their trauma resurfacing. The university president resigned suddenly on a Thursday morning, said it was for personal reasons, family health issues. We all knew better. The board was forcing him out. The board was cleaning house systematically. Anyone connected to the cover-ups was being pushed out quietly. It was satisfying to watch, but also infuriating that it took federal involvement for them to act. Rachel discovered something horrible in the final batch of evidence from Jake's phone. He'd been planning to substance someone at an upcoming party. They had messages discussing which girls would be easiest targets, who didn't have many friends to notice, who wouldn't be believed if they reported anything. My name was on the list with a star next to it. That revelation broke something in me that I'd been holding together with sheer will. I'd been holding it together for months, being the strong one, being strong for everyone who needed me. But seeing my name on that list with detailed plans made it real in a different way. I spent 3 days in bed, unable to move. The girls took turns bringing me food I couldn't eat, sitting with me in silence, reminding me we'd won, that he couldn't hurt anyone now. My dad used that list in court as evidence of premeditation. It showed clear planning and intent to commit assault, intent to harm specific targets. Jake's lawyers tried to argue it was just talk between college boys, just jokes between friends that were taken out of context. But combined with everything else, it painted a clear picture for the jury. These weren't mistakes or misunderstandings. This was predatory behavior from someone who'd been enabled his whole life. The university settled the civil suits quickly and quietly. They couldn't afford the publicity of a drawn-out trial with daily news coverage. Each victim received substantial compensation, scholarship reinstatement for those who'd lost funding, formal apologies that actually acknowledged wrongdoing, policy changes named after us that would protect future students. It wasn't enough for what we'd endured, but it was something tangible. Jake's uncle pled guilty to avoid the spectacle of a trial, couldn't face having all his crimes laid out publicly for his colleagues to see. He got 5 to 7 years in federal prison, lost his pension he'd built over decades, his reputation in academic circles destroyed forever. Everything he'd built by destroying others crumbled. He looked small in his orange jumpsuit at sentencing, pathetic and ordinary without his power. The criminal trial for Jake and his friends took months of preparation and testimony. We all testified over several days, faced brutal cross-examination from defense attorneys, relived our worst moments in front of strangers who were judging our credibility. But we did it together as a united front, supported each other through the hardest questions, held hands during the worst parts when they showed evidence, refused to be broken by the process designed to break us. Jake took the stand in his own defense against his lawyer's advice. It was a catastrophic mistake. He couldn't help himself, the narcissism too strong, started lying about things we had recordings of him saying, got angry when confronted with his own words, showed everyone in that courtroom exactly who he really was beneath the polished exterior. His lawyers looked defeated as he destroyed destroyed his own case. The jury deliberated for less than a day before returning. Guilty on all counts: assault, conspiracy, harassment. Jake got 8 to 12 years in state prison. His friends got various sentences based on their level of involvement. When they read the verdict, Jake's mom screamed from the gallery, called us liars and whores, had to be physically removed from court by bailiffs. I felt nothing but hollow victory. After it was over, we all went to Sarah's apartment in silence, ordered pizza that sat mostly uneaten, cried until we had no tears left, laughed at things that weren't funny, felt empty and full at the same time, drained but complete. Justice had been served, but it didn't erase what happened to us. Didn't give us back the time we lost to fear, the innocence stolen by predators. But it was something real and final. The university implemented new policies within months, independent reporting systems run by trained professionals, mandatory training that actually addressed consent and bystander intervention, support services run by people who understood trauma and believed survivors. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than before. Future students would be safer because we fought and won. I started speaking at other schools the following semester, sharing our story to packed auditoriums, warning about the signs everyone missed, teaching girls to trust their instincts when something felt wrong, to support each other instead of competing, to document everything because memory could be questioned, to never give up even when the system failed them. My dad came to every speech when he could, said he was proud of me afterward, that I was stronger than he ever imagined possible. Sarah graduated with honors that spring, gave a speech at commencement about resilience and finding strength in community, about finding your voice when others tried to silence it, about the power of believing survivors and standing together. She got a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. Jake's empty seat in the audience said everything that needed to be said about consequences. Rachel's sister finished her degree too after returning, walked across that stage with her head held high and shoulders back. Her family cried in the audience. Rachel cried beside me. We all cried together. It had been a long journey back, but she made it. Proved that they couldn't destroy her spirit, that she was more than what happened to her in that dark room. Our group stayed close after graduation, bonds unbreakable. We had connections forged in fire and struggle, understanding born from shared trauma and triumph, love that came from seeing each other at our absolute worst and choosing to stay anyway. We were more than survivors now. We were sisters in every way that mattered, warriors who'd fought together, champions for each other, and those who came after. The ripple effects continued for years afterward. Other universities started investigating similar patterns of cover-ups. More administrators were exposed and removed. More victims found justice and closure. We'd started something bigger than just our individual cases. We'd changed how these things were handled systemically, made it harder for predators to hide behind institutional protection. I still have nightmares sometimes that wake me in cold sweats, still flinch at certain smells that bring me back, still feel my heart race in empty study rooms with no windows. But I also feel proud of what we accomplished, strong in ways I never imagined, connected to something bigger than myself or my trauma. We'd faced monsters and won decisively, protected future students from similar harm, refused to be silenced by power and threats. Jake will be out eventually on parole. His uncle too if he serves minimum time. They'll have to register as offenders for life, live with restrictions on where they can work and live, face consequences for the rest of their lives wherever they go. It's not enough for what they took from us and others, but it's something tangible. And sometimes something has to be enough to move forward. The university put up a plaque in the library last year, right where Jake cornered me that first time. It talks about consent and respect, about resources for those who need help, about the importance of believing survivors and taking action. I like to think of him seeing it when he gets out someday, knowing that spot where he felt powerful and untouchable now stands for everything he tried to destroy, that his hunting ground became a monument to his downfall. We won in every way that mattered. It cost us everything, but we won completely. And now when I tell this story to new audiences, I don't shake anymore from remembered fear. Don't cry from the pain of memory. Just feel proud of what we accomplished together, of who we became through struggle, of the girls we protected by refusing to stay silent when silence was expected, by playing the long game with patience, by winning against those who thought they were untouchable. I spent the next few weeks trying to get back to normal, started going to classes again, eating regular meals, sleeping through the night without waking up in panic. The other girls and I still met up twice a week at Sarah's place. We'd order Chinese food and watch trashy reality TV. Nobody talked about the trial or what came next. We just existed together in comfortable silence. Then one Tuesday my phone buzzed during chemistry lab. It was my dad. Jake's family was appealing the verdict. They'd hired some hotshot lawyer from New York. Guy specialized in getting rich kids out of trouble. My hand started shaking so bad I dropped my test tube. The TA asked if I was okay. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. The lawyer started a media campaign immediately. Went on every podcast that would have him. Said we were a coordinated group of liars. That we'd planned this whole thing for money. That the university settlement proved we were just after cash. He had this smooth way of talking that made lies sound reasonable. Made Jake sound like the real victim. Rachel found the interviews first. Sent them to our group chat at 2 a.m. We all stayed up listening to this man twist our truth into something ugly. He claimed the recordings were edited. That we'd seduced Jake and his friends for evidence. That my dad had coached us all on what to say. Every word felt like being assaulted all over again. Sarah wanted to respond publicly. Do our own interviews. Set the record straight. But my dad said no. Said it would only give them more ammunition. That we'd won in court where it mattered. That public opinion couldn't change the verdict. He was right, but it still hurt watching people online debate whether we were telling the truth. The appeals process meant more meetings with lawyers, more depositions, more questions about every detail of our lives. Jake's new lawyer was worse than the others. He'd ask about our dating histories, our social media posts from high school, whether we'd been drinking at parties freshman year, trying to find anything to make us look bad. I started getting messages from strangers, some supportive, most not. They'd found my Instagram even though it was private, somehow got my phone number, my email. Random numbers would call at 3 a.m., breathing heavy, whispering threats, saying they knew where I lived, that Jake was innocent, that I'd ruined a good man's life. Campus security increased patrols around our dorms, but they couldn't be everywhere. I'd see guys who looked like Jake's friends and panic, run to the nearest building, hide in bathrooms until my heart stopped racing. Later I'd realize they were just random students, but in the moment my body couldn't tell the difference. Rachel's mental health started deteriorating. She'd been so strong during the trial, our secret weapon, but the aftermath was crushing her. She stopped going to classes, stopped showering. Her roommate called me worried, said Rachel hadn't left her bed in 3 days, just stared at the ceiling playing the same song on on repeat. We staged an intervention of sorts. All showed up at her dorm with her favorite snacks. Didn't leave until she talked to us. She broke down completely. Said she felt guilty for betraying Jake's friends, even though they were monsters. Even though she'd done the right thing, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was a terrible person. Sarah's family started getting calls too. Her little sister was being bullied at school. Kids saying her family was full of liars. That Sarah had made everything up for attention. Her parents wanted her to come home, transfer schools, start fresh somewhere nobody knew her name. But Sarah refused to run. The university tried to distance themselves from the whole situation, stopped returning our calls about the promised policy changes. The new support services were understaffed and underfunded. The independent reporting system was run by one overworked counselor. Everything they'd promised was falling apart already. My grades were suffering from all the stress. I'd been pre-med since freshman year, had a 3.9 GPA before all this started. Now I was barely passing organic chemistry, couldn't focus during lectures, kept having flashbacks during labs. My advisor suggested taking a semester off, but I couldn't let them win like that. Jake's uncle got transferred to a minimum security facility, some country club prison with tennis courts. His lawyer argued he wasn't a physical threat, just a white-collar criminal who destroyed evidence. The judge agreed, said he'd served enough time in regular prison. It made me want to scream at the injustice. Then something shifted. A journalist reached out through my dad, real investigative reporter, not some podcaster looking for clicks. She'd been following our case for months, had done deep research into Jake's family, found patterns going back generations, wanted to tell the real story if we'd cooperate. We met her at a diner off campus. She was older, maybe 50s, had kind eyes and rough hands, showed us her previous work exposing corruption, SX trafficking rings, corporate cover-ups. She wasn't interested in drama, just facts, just truth. We agreed to work with her. She spent weeks interviewing each of us separately, asked hard questions but respectfully, actually listened to our answers, fact-checked everything we said, dug into court records, university finances, found connections we'd missed. The story was bigger than even we'd realized. Jake's family had been donating to the university for decades, not just normal donations, targeted ones, to specific administrators, to specific programs, always right after someone in their family got in trouble. Jake's older brother had similar accusations in high school, all buried with money. The article came out on a Monday morning, front page of a major newspaper, picked up by wire services immediately. It laid out everything in devastating detail, the systematic cover-ups, the financial connections, the generational pattern of abuse, names, dates, dollar amounts, all verified and fact-checked. Jake's family lawyer went silent after that. No more podcasts, no more interviews. The appeal suddenly stalled. Their PR firm dropped them as clients. Other victims started coming forward, not just from our university, from Jake's high school, his brother's fraternity at another college. The pattern was undeniable. The university board called an emergency meeting. This time they couldn't ignore it, couldn't claim ignorance. The article had exposed too much. Alumni were pulling donations. Parents were threatening to pull their kids. The damage to their reputation was catastrophic. They needed to act decisively. They fired 3 more administrators who'd been named in the article, launched a real investigation into decades of cover-ups, hired an outside firm to overhaul their entire reporting system, allocated actual money for victim support services. It was everything they should have done initially. Rachel started getting better after the article came out, said seeing the truth in print made her feel validated, like she hadn't imagined how bad it was. She started going to therapy twice a week, taking her medication regularly, slowly returning to herself, still fragile but fighting. Sarah got into her dream graduate program, full scholarship to study public policy, wanted to work on legislation protecting students, make real systematic change. Her family was so proud. Her little sister wrote her college essay about having a hero for a sister, made us all cry when Sarah shared it. I managed to salvage my grades somewhat, retook organic chemistry over the summer, got my GPA back above 3.5. Not what it was before, but respectable. My med school applications talked about overcoming adversity, about fighting for justice. Some schools rejected me, others saw strength in survival. Jake's appeal was formally denied. His lawyer withdrew from the case. His family stopped visiting him in prison. Even they couldn't pretend anymore. He was truly alone with the consequences of his actions. No money or connections could save him now. He'd have to serve his full sentence. More universities started reaching out, wanting us to speak about our experience, help them reform their systems. We started a consulting firm of sorts, reviewing policies, training administrators, making sure other students wouldn't face what we did, turning our trauma into something productive. The nightmares faded slowly. Therapy helped. Time helped. Having each other helped most. We'd text at random hours, share memes, complain about normal things, boys who ghosted us, professors who assigned too much reading, regular college problems that felt like gifts after everything. Rachel's sister graduated with her social work degree, got a job at a crisis center, helping other survivors navigate the system. She said our fight had inspired her career choice, that she wanted to be the advocate she'd needed, to make sure nobody felt alone in their worst moments. I ran into one of Jake's former friends at a coffee shop. He looked away immediately, practically ran out the door, left his expensive latte on the counter. It was a small moment but satisfying. They'd all transferred schools after the article, couldn't handle everyone knowing what they'd done. The trophy folder evidence led to more investigations. FBI got involved, found similar groups at other schools, a whole network of entitled predators sharing tactics, sharing victims. The investigation expanded nationally. Our case had exposed something massive and systemic. My dad framed the newspaper article, hung it in his office, said it was the case he was proudest of, not because of the legal victory, but because we'd changed things, protected future students, refused to be silenced by power and money, made real lasting change. Sarah started dating someone new junior year, nice guy from her statistics class. She was terrified at first, kept waiting for him to reveal some horrible secret, but he was just genuinely kind, patient with her triggers, understanding about her past, proof that good men existed. We all went to Rachel's graduation together, cheered embarrassingly loud when she walked. Her parents cried, her sister cried, we all cried again. She'd almost dropped out so many times, but she made it. Graduated with honors in psychology, planned to get her doctorate. The university put up a memorial garden, named it after all of us, had benches with plaques telling our story. It was beautiful but also strange, seeing our trauma memorialized in landscaping, but students would sit there studying, reading the plaques, learning what happened. That mattered. Jake wrote me a letter from prison. My dad intercepted it, asked if I wanted to read it. I said no. Whatever he had to say didn't matter. His words had no power over me anymore. My dad had it destroyed, said it was probably manipulation anyway, an attempt to maintain control. We started a scholarship fund with part of our settlement money for students who'd experienced assault, who needed financial help to stay in school. The university matched our contribution. It grew every year, helped dozens of students continue their education, something positive from all that pain. I got into medical school eventually. Not my first choice, but a good program. Specialized in trauma-informed care. Wanted to be the doctor I'd needed, who understood that healing wasn't linear. That trauma lived in the body. That believing patience was the first step. The 5-year anniversary of the trial passed quietly. We all met up for dinner. Nobody mentioned what day it was. Just caught up on life, jobs, relationships, normal things. We'd integrated the experience. It was part of us, but didn't define us anymore. We were more than survivors now. Jake's uncle died in prison. Heart attack, apparently. He was only 55. Jake wasn't allowed to attend the funeral. His family didn't want him there anyway. They disowned him completely. Changed their last name even. Wanted no connection to what he'd done. The changes at the university became a model for others. Federal guidelines were updated based on our case. Training programs implemented nationally. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Real systematic change that would outlast all of us. Our names attached to something meaningful. I still see Sarah regularly. She works in DC now, drafting legislation, making change at the highest levels. Rachel's a therapist specializing in trauma, helps other survivors find their voice. Her sister runs a nonprofit. We all found ways to transform pain into purpose. Sometimes I walk past that spot in the library, where it all started. The plaque is still there. Students sitting nearby studying, oblivious to the history. And that's okay. They're safe because we weren't, because we fought, because we won. That's enough for me.